Good evening, everyone. It being 6 p.m. on Tuesday, May 14th, we will begin our fourth evening of budget hearings for the FY25 budget. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence for all those who serve in our military at home and abroad, and for their families. Thank you. Clerk Semino, can we have a roll call, please?
Councillor Barrica?
Here.
Councillor Morin?
Here.
Councillor Flaherty?
Here.
Councillor Maglio?
Here.
Councillor Reynolds will not be attending this evening.
Thank you. All right, we have no approval of minutes this evening, and we have no old business this evening. And then for anyone who may be watching at home, we will be holding our public hearing on the town budget when residents will be allowed to comment on Wednesday, May 29th at 7 p.m. So two changes. It's a Wednesday, and it starts at 7 p.m. Between now and then, you can please email any questions or comments to towncouncil@braintreema.gov. All right, we're going to be moving on to our new business, which is 24020 Mayor FY 2025 operating budget, or take up any action relative thereto. Do we have a motion to take that order off the table?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to take off the table order 24020.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. All right, so this evening we will be reviewing golf, law, and our finance programs. And we'll start off this evening with golf. And I know we have Darren Brown here from our municipal golf course. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And DPW Director Jim Arsenal as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown, would you like to start off with any statement, or?
Yeah.
Please go right ahead.
Do that. So since COVID, golf has really seen a resurgence in popularity. And I believe that this one is a lot more durable than other golf booms in the early 2000s. This one is really driven by younger golfers that have gotten into the game. As proof of my 23-year-old who has never played golf before is now taking lessons. And also women are the second biggest driver of golf. And that certainly is true for us with our ladies clinics. We had 260 women sign up last year, and this year all of our women's clinics have been selling out whenever we announce them. We've had some really good years since COVID. We've been able to start putting a little bit of money back into the golf course, which is sorely needed after some lean years. And this budget reflects a little bit of that. Having come back for some transfers from prior, we're putting some of that money in as well. So I think this budget really just reflects kind of somewhat of level funding. 53% of our increase is part-time labor. And we used to have most of our employees working at minimum wage. It's very difficult to get people to work for $15 an hour. Now, it was easy to find help before. Now we're having difficulty, and we're having to pay close to $17 to $18 to $22 an hour if you're handling cash in the pro shop. So a large portion of our budget increases this year is really just a reflection of having to pay much higher than minimum wage. We have about 60 people on staff during the summer. The majority of them are all retirees or college students, and they're seasonal for the most part. About 18% of our budget this year is an increase in pension, health care, and transfer to general fund, make up the next largest part. About 12% increase of that is for credit card fees, which we're just trying to get a handle on. We are negotiating some lower rates, so we're expecting to see some savings in FY25. And 12% of our increase is contractual raises with the various unions that are involved in the budget. At one point in time, we did have 6.5 full-time union maintenance workers. We are now down to 3 through attrition and budget cuts over the past 6 years. So we run a pretty lean staff for the majority of our help retirees and college kids. In FY23, we had about $263,000 in profit that was put back into the retained earnings, and we're on track in FY24 to be in that same area, probably about $200,000 to $225,000. We are going to have to put some money into the building at some point. We've got a 38-year-old clubhouse that's going to need some ADA upgrades, new doors and some windows replaced. We're going to look at getting some quotes and pursuing some of those in the fall budget, and I may have to come back before you when we have time to look at those projects. But going through the budget, would you like me to go through some of the increases?
I would say if
there's
committee
questions?
members are amenable, we can probably just get to questions, Mr.
Great.
Brown. That's all right with everyone? And just before we do that, again, we went over this last evening, but for anybody who may not have watched last night, the enterprise funds are self-sustaining. They're paid for through fees that cover the cost and it's fees for the people who use the golf course. So this is wholly separate and apart from our general operating budget. I just want to make sure that it's not so easy to understand when everything's lumped into one big bucket, but the golf fund is not part of the general operating budget. Again, it's paid for through the fees of golf membership and other fees that come through the golf course. So do any of the committee members have questions or comments? Councillor Flaherty?
So you mentioned that you were looking to get a handle on credit card fees.
Yes.
And, gosh, you have $50,000 proposed to cover those. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on how to best manage that? What do other golf courses do? What are your options?
From our current point of sales vendor, we've been able to get some reduced rates that will be going into effect for the FY25. I just didn't want to be caught short. We had moved some of those costs over to food and beverage to cover some of their costs, but I felt that it was better to proportion it off more in line with what the credit card fees were. Last year we spent about $79,000. Excuse me. Last year we spent $81,000, and we're hoping to see a reduction of about $30,000 is what we're being told from the quotes that we've been getting, especially when we integrate Apple Pay into our payment portal.
Am I remembering correctly that the introduction of the credit card is to the golf course use is kind of new? Were you not accepting credit cards before?
So we've been always accepting credit cards. We're now requiring, which every golf course does, requiring a credit card to make a reservation, to hold your reservation.
I see.
So we do not charge the credit card at the time you make the reservation online, just like with a hotel, but it does hold it, and so if there's a no-show, which we do have, and we will mark them as a no-show, and then the point-of-sales system will actually charge them. Last year, we had just over $35,000 in no-show fees. So it's real money that does come back to us. And when we're sold out like today, if a foursome doesn't show up, we're gonna charge you. And it really has cut down on our no-shows, so to speak. I was trying to implement it in 2019, and then COVID came along, and COVID forced us to implement that. And we have seen a dramatic decrease. In 2019, we had $90,000 in no-shows, blanks on our T-sheet from people who didn't show up. And this year, actually say the past 3 years, we've been able to recoup almost all of it. The only time we don't charge a no-show if it's a washout or a rain day.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. Councillor Maglio?
Thank you. One question to follow up on Councilor Flaherty. The $35,000 in no-show fees, those were when you said there's no way to get that back, you mean if we don't keep the take the card as a deposit?
Yes,
Like, did we
I might
get-
not have explained it clearly. Since we've been charging no-shows well, it's been since COVID, so since 2020, on average, we are getting back $35,000 in no-show fees that our point-of-sales vendor charges the golfers that don't show up.
Gotcha.
And so that's a check that gets mailed to the town, we deposit it in the golf fund, so it's been a win-win. Instead of losing, we're getting that money back.
Right, excellent. So my questions have to do with the food and beverage
Yes.
portion of the golf course. And I'm not quite sure I understand how this budget is set up, because the food and beverage manager is pretty much all zeroed out.
So food and beverage has moved into its own revolving fund inside the golf enterprise fund budget back in, I think, FY19 possibly. And I keep coming before you to keep getting it increased, to increase our spending limit. We're now at a spending limit of $550,000. So that revolving fund amount, which is authorized by council, lets us spend up to that amount. And within that amount, we have our own little budget for the food and beverage director's salary, for the cost and purchase of food, beverages, operations expenses, improvements to the food and beverage spaces. It's been running pretty well. We're happy with it. We just hired a new food and beverage manager this week, and we're excited for him to come on in a month. But it's been a very popular feature of the golf course.
I bet. So,
So it's not reflected in the line item count of the budget.
okay.
Am I explaining that correctly, Mike?
There's a specific revolving fund account where essentially it's any balances that aren't expended need to be reauthorized to spend against that ceiling every year. In this case, with the revenues in fiscal 23 is the actual we last reported in the budget book is at 533. So that those are revenues that are eligible to sustain that salary as well as all the other operating costs associated with the program just for food and beverage.
And so that, so any food and beverage sales go directly into that enterprise account?
The revolving fund
The
count
revolving,
within the
sorry.
golf enterprise.
The revolving, okay.
We also have a second revolving fund for pro shop merchandise
Mm-hmm.
and for lessons. So there's a pro shop revolving fund where we take the receipts from the sale of merchandise and also the registrations of our junior clinics and ladies clinics, and those all stay in that revolving fund to which we buy supplies or pay the instructors or use it to buy more merchandise.
Excellent, okay. So one thing that came up last week that I thought would be good to just kind of elevate now is that the golf course was loaned a certain amount of money about 7 years ago, would you say it was?
FY17.
FY17.
17 and 18, I have those numbers somewhere.
And what was that amount roughly?
The total amount at the time was 320.
The balance is about 320 before the 100,000 that was authorized for repayment last week.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it was just over $300,000 about 7 or 8 years ago.
Correct.
And in that time, there has been an effort to pay that down. And most recently, there's another 100,000 that went toward that balance.
Correct.
So now the balance would be about 220.
Yes.
And I believe that you said that you think that you're scheduled to maybe pay that all off in the fall, or?
What
did
I'd
I
like
get
to
that
do is
wrong?
see how we finish out the fiscal year, and when our receipts get certified, that we could look to see where our retained earning balance is and later in the fall, and then see what we're able to afford for another part of the repayment.
That's fantastic. Excellent. So,
We do have some ADA issues in the clubhouse that I really need to address, so I do want to bring that into the conversation when we get to that point, because those are pressing for us as well.
That's good news in terms of being able to be self-sufficient and then some at this point because of the way that it's being, that the funding has been structured and the fact that it's a desirable place to be and to go and to spend money. So that's exciting. Do you anticipate any kind of change based on the facility that's now on 93, and then now there's also one at the mall? Do those indoor places have any impact on?
So as far as the simulator operations at the mall, we did make an investment over the winter that I came back and got a transfer for because I kind of had exceeded the line account, where we made some investments in those simulators to upgrade ours to the same capability as those in the mall. And the simulators were actually just paid off in the FY24 budget. And so I think we're well positioned going forward to be competitive. And if there is a dip in the business, our annual expenses are about $35,000 less because we're no longer having to pay the bond and interest payment as they've been paid off. We have a little bit different setup than the mall does. The mall's a little more open air with 13 simulators, many of them back to back. Our setup is a little more cozy, I guess would be a better word. And we've got a real strong indoor golf league during the winter where we've been selling out almost every year. So yes, they're competition, but I don't think it's really going to affect us in the long run.
And whenever the simulator is open or the course is open, is the
Counselor,
rest?
can you just put your mic?
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry, yes. Whenever the simulator is open or the course is open, is the food open and is the bar open?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So when we brought food and beverage in-house, it really had to have some type of winter operation to sustain the salaries of the food and beverage employees. So that's why when Mayor Sullivan and I set that up, it was we did food and beverage together along with the simulators, along with the new addition. So we're actually able to, we make some significant profit in food and beverage while providing a service for those using simulators.
Excellent. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you,
job.
Counselor. Counselor Moran?
Thank you. Darren, I want to start by saying Braintree Municipal Golf Course is one of the finest municipal golf courses around. It's excellently run. It's a first-class facility and a very challenging golf course. I have seen more of the water over there than anyone else. I could solve a drought with my golf game.
Thank you.
I want to start, I'd like to talk briefly about your fee structure. I don't want to go
Sure. Yeah.
into it in depth.
Absolutely.
You've transitioned a little bit more into 9-hole than you did in the past, is that correct?
We're providing discount rates in the evening so that they're kind of equate to a 9-hole rate. And then we do have a 9-hole rate for our resident seniors if they wanted to play in the middle of the day where they felt they couldn't make all 18. We have such a demand for 18-hole rounds that obviously those are a priority from a retail perspective because we're getting probably 40% more for that greens fee. But golf is really looking to have 9 holes, just the game in general.
They're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, and so,
Okay. But your fee structure accommodates this budget, correct?
yes, it
Okay.
does, yes.
Is it predominantly, is the fee structure alone, the greens fees alone, enough to support the budget, or?
Yes, so the golf cart revenue brings in about $450,000. There's an increase in the line account for that this year. So that's a very profitable end for us. And then the greens fees themselves, they bring in about $1.6 million. So just like in FY '23, where we were able to make about 263,000, we're similar to that. So our fee structure right now, I think, is right in the sweet spot.
Okay.
And I think we're charging what we can get in the open market.
I think it's very fair. And I know you've put in a lot of work to get it to where it is so that it's just right and you're hitting the right spot. I know we had a lot of conversations years ago about it. Regarding the pro shop, is the pro shop covering its own expenses?
Pro Shop is covering its own expenses. We had a transition to a new golf pro last year who's been fantastic, longtime resident, Dylan Casserly, who's done a great job. Merchandise sales were up last year. He's done a really good job in capitalizing the latest and greatest things that are out there. Mostly shirts, hats, balls, gloves, some shoes, and we do have a selection of clubs. We try not to have too many clubs, or it's an expensive item to keep in stock. So it is, the profit we do make, it's not huge. It might be 16 to 20,000 depending on the year. It rolls over into the next year. And some of the money that we do have rollover, we're able to cover if there's a shortfall in the revolving fund, or if we want to make an investment in new furniture or some new merchandise or some new programs, we have that ability.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask now a couple of questions about turf maintenance.
Yes.
Your animal maintenance budget is reflecting the actual cost, and that's the goats?
No, it's actually more than that. I actually didn't know where to put it, but
Okay.
we're in the middle of an Audubon Cooperative Sanctuary Program at the golf course, where we're
Okay.
hoping to be certified. There's only probably about 30 golf courses in the state out of the 376. So it's a program that we've dug into where it takes about 2 to 3 years. Wildlife habitat documentation, creating some pollinator gardens, doing a lot of other infrastructure items around the golf course, birdhouses, bluebird trails. We've got a lot going on with that. We do have a consultant that is helping us with it. It's not just a rubber stamp from the Audubon Society. It's a big program that we're into, that I'm passionate about. There also is an increase there too, because we need a new goat barn this year. Our old goat barn is old.
Yeah, and you do heat it in the winter as well.
So
the cord.
we do have a really good large animal vet. She comes out twice a year.
Yeah.
And we have storm windows on there.
Yeah.
And they have heated water buckets, and she said we have a great setup. But we don't actually have internal heat on there, but
Okay.
she tells us that they are fine, and every year they're happy. They're happy to get out this week. They're going back out into the woods. They're tired of eating hay for the last 5 months, so they're anxious to get back out. But I'm hoping to come back in the fall and talk about the progress on our Audubon Cooperative Sanctuary Program.
Okay. Your pesticide budget is reflecting the reality of what your last several years are. All of your applications, people are licensed appropriately with the state?
Yes, and in fact, we take pride, and the council had approved a GPS sprayer a number of years ago, which the accuracy is unrivaled, and we're one of the few golf courses to have that. And in fact, about 10% of our budget is certified organic.
Okay. Now to the carts.
Yes.
Your cart budget is doubled, pretty much, if I'm reading
Yes.
it correctly.
So what's happened there, Counselor, is that we have 59 golf carts. And of those 59, the new lease that went into effect, it took 2 years to get this last batch of golf carts, they have GPS screens on them. So our lease cost per year is substantially higher. That added instantly about $23,000 to the lease itself.
What made you do that? The people that play, who care about that, carry the distance finders.
Yeah, I agree with you, but all the other golf courses had it, and it really has taken off. Our rentals are way up. My golf pro has been begging me to lease more golf carts. We've been actually running out of carts on a regular basis. So I expect to see an increase in our cart revenue. You'll also see a significant reduction in our tournament cart rental fleet. We've had over 20 shotgun tournaments a year. This year we have, I think, 21. And for every one of those large tournaments, we have to bring in rental carts. And they're between 17 and 20 carts have to be brought in for every single tournament. And the rental companies charge us $100 per cart. So for every tournament, we're spending between $1,700 and $2,000 extra to bring those in. But by adding extra carts to our lease, it does two things for us. A, it'll keep us from running out of golf carts on a regular day. And B, it will negate us from having to bring in rental carts and pay that. And that's why you're seeing a $37,000 reduction in our tournament rental line account.
Okay, are these carts, are they electric or are they gas or what?
They're all gas right now. I will have to come back in the fall and get some money because we're going to have to do a design build to do an expansion of our existing cart barn and figure out how we're going to house the additional carts and all the chargers that are required.
Okay, is the 10,000 that you've increased for maintenance from 5 the year before, but you've been running 13 with a smaller fleet, is the 10 going to cover your maintenance?
I'm hoping.
Okay.
We're gonna try and do a better job of keeping track of some of the damage, and that inevitably happens at golf courses. This year, we're gonna make a better effort at that. And also, with the increase in the size of the fleet, it does increase our annual fleet maintenance.
Okay, my last two questions are on the Golf Pro category. Is the compensation of the Golf Pro derived from other than the salary line? He also lessons or?
Nope, the golf pro working, a golf pro working in a municipal environment cannot have any type of secondary compensation.
Okay.
So that is just a straight
Just wanted
salary.
to make sure that we were consistent on that.
Yep.
And what is the reason for the growth in the line for professional staff expense?
I think proper budgeting. I've come back 2 SUPs in a row and had to add more money to that line account. And so I'm trying to realistically budget. And I'd have to look at the exact numbers, but I think probably 90% of that budget is from minimum wage employees that we're still paying $15 an hour to, and we're actually looking to raise that to $16 an hour. We've been fortunate to get staff to do that.
Who is included in professional staff?
Professional staff is made up of the starters on the first tee, the rangers, the employees washing golf carts, and also the clerk behind the counter collecting fees.
And those are all part-time?
All part-time seasonal.
Okay.
That's how
And
we're
they
able.
all do a great job, by the way. My last question, and I skipped over it, your fertilizer bill's doubling.
Fertilizer expenses are crazy worldwide. Fertilizer is up. They're all petroleum-based products to a certain extent. We have incorporated some organic. Organic is really expensive. Just one bag of greens fertilizer for a green that's organic is over $100 a bag. So we are incorporating some more organic as we're going along, but overall fertilizer prices worldwide are really expensive.
Thank you. Again, I want to extol the virtues of your facility. I think it's a wonderful facility for golfers. In the off-season, it's an outstanding place for residents to walk. It's a beautiful place in the winter. I think every resident should take advantage of it in one way or another. It's a hidden gem in some aspects. For those who don't golf, if people just want to walk that in the winter months, it's amazing.
And ski if we ever have snow.
Yep. Yep. Well,
Thank you, Counselor.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Moore. And Counselor Maglio, second time?
Yes, please. So I have a question. The goats, I thought that they just came periodically, but they actually live at the course? They're our goats?
Yes, I had gotten the goats in 2000.
Check his shirt out.
That's right. I had gotten the.
Any of that
Exactly.
Yeah.
They had been using goats at a course in California. I had read an article about it. They're using them to control brush in rocky areas. I had approached Mayor Sullivan about buying some goats, and he kind of rolled his eyes and said, sure, go ahead. And we did get goats, and we use them to eat poison ivy in the woods. We have a movable pen, and we move them from section to section to section throughout the golf course, and they chew up the brush, and they chew up the poison ivy. And we actually get credit from the Audubon Society for that part of our program. The goats have actually been on Good Morning America, so they've had some screen time. We have 5 at this time. We are in need of a few more for our flock. We have a couple that are getting kind of old, but they're very popular. They serve a great need at the golf course, and everybody loves them.
So this was during the Sullivan administration. So this was a while ago that this
Yeah.
happened. How did I not know that? Because that is a very popular, eco-friendly, newer
Yeah.
way of naturally fighting these, various species.
They're doing great with the invasives
Yeah.
that we're dealing with.
Right, without using pesticides.
Right.
So are there like visiting programs for the goats? Can people see them? Is that something to
No,
sort of...
so
Sorry,
they're,
Council.
They're out there.
they're out in
to
the middle of the golf
capitalize
course, and
on.
we do move them around with a bucket of sweet grain and driving a golf cart really fast. Jim had asked a while back, we bring them down to a DPW touch-a-truck event.
Yeah.
And trying to get goats into a small trailer was just,
Yeah.
they were not having it. So we were able to get one in, but, and Mayor Sullivan had tried to get us to bring them up to the high school, and that was tough. So
So
they're,
that's amazing.
they're on course.
And the other quicker piece is the Audubon Sanctuary rating. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, it's a certification. So we'll have some signage posted when we get there. We have 2 beehives that we've been maintaining, so we're hoping this fall we'll have some honey for sale in the pro shop, which is quite popular. And we need to develop a pollinator garden. We already have a milkweed garden going for our monarchs, and so we're looking to expand that program throughout. We've gotten some certifications from Audubon on water quality management and a few other areas. We've got a ways to go. We're hoping to chip away more at it this year, and I'm hoping to come back in the fall when things are a little quieter and do a PowerPoint presentation of where we're at.
Excellent. I look forward to it. I'm
Great.
also going to come and visit the goats.
Please do.
All right. Thank you very much.
You have to go to the goats. The goats can't come to us. Yes. So they're out for the next council meeting.
Trust me, I've tried.
I thank you so much, Mr. Brandon. I think it'd be phenomenal if you could come back in the fall, and we'll put a request in through the council president so that we can learn more about the Audubon certification. To echo everybody's sentiments, the golf course is an awesome service for our community. I have one final question. One of the things that Director Esmond had talked about on the first evening of our budget hearings was looking at all the fees. I understand the fee for using, I guess it's the restaurant or the conference area. What would you call that little gathering spot? Is that, are we looking at,
That was.
How are those fees
That was
looked at?
significantly increased for this year.
Okay.
It's to keep the discussion concise. We did a lot of events there, which really kind of detracted from the golfer experience. Having a
got it.
Masters weekend, having a baby shower, the golfers got kind of annoyed, so we've kind of pushed away some of those out of the
Okay.
prime season, but we really weren't charging last year. This year, we made some phone calls, and so our rate to use the facility is equal to similar venues in town and the surrounding areas.
Okay, that answers my question, so thank you very much. Any other questions on golf? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
your
you
time.
so much for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in the fall.
I hope for sunny weather.
Excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry, we have to do a technical or procedural motion on the revolving fund. I apologize.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
We just have to take it off the table if there's any questions on revolving fund, and then we have to put it back on the table. So, Do we have a motion to take off the table Order 24022 for the revolving funds?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. Are there any questions on the revolving fund? Seeing none. Is there a motion to put 24022 on the table?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Now you're
Thank you
free to
again.
go.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we will be moving on to law. Director Esmond, are you here for that department as well? Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you to our DPW team as well.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night. Do you have anything you want to start with, or should we just open it up? Go.
I'll just make some very brief comments
Yeah.
about the law department budget. It's, as you can see in the detail, it's rather streamlined in that there's only 4 line items that are actually funded in the law department administration program, with the preponderance of the funding in outside counsel. KP Law was authorized earlier this spring as our council, and in the agreement that was summarized to town council, the funding estimate from that annual valued at $130,000. They're not the only outside counsel services we use, but they would be presumably the largest firm, the firm with the largest cost in this. Frankly, there's not a lot of experience that we could use to estimate a full year value to this agreement and the other council services we may use from time over the course of the year. Currently, this year we spent about $55,000 with the remaining 2 months of billings to go. But with a full annual number, we'll have to see how the actual experience and costs go. At the published billing rate of at the contracted billing rate of $255, the $250 buys just under 1,000 hours. And so that's a considerable number over an annual basis, but we'll be mindful, obviously, that there are things that we can't know will come up, and there are things that we know will come up. And we'll monitor the cost of that with KP Law, as well as other outside counsel services that we use through the year. The other amounts that are funded here are hopefully, really just small amounts to ensure that we can support memberships or supplies through the year, and just wanted to make sure that we had some budget in this department for those purposes, in addition to the outside counsel costs.
Thank you, Director Esmond. Are there any questions regarding the legal department? I have one, which is, and I believe my recollection is that Councilor Maglio had asked about this last year. Don't have it in front of me, and if you don't have the answer tonight, if we can just get it sent to us, the number of lawsuits that we're actively involved in, and if you're at liberty to at least give the general, what is it, that would be helpful, so we understand, are any of these legal actions avoidable for future, lessons learned, or what we might want to be doing differently going forward with the budget constraints we have, and what we are pursuing legally, and what we should and what we maybe don't need to.
Okay, yeah, I will, we'll work to get that back to the council.
Thank you. And like I said, I think we had asked this last year as well, so hopefully it's an update. Councilor Maglio, do you remember that?
Did ask that, and I think we also had asked what kind of hours and what kind of expense was going into fighting those lawsuits year after year.
Thank you. Did you have anything, Councilor? Any other questions for legal? Councilor Moran?
I just want to publicly disclose, as I did at the time of the appointment of KP Law, that I did file with the town clerk's office a disclosure that I have a financial interest, namely a spouse who works for KP Law as a executive assistant to the well, she has a longer title than I've ever had, but to the managing partner of the firm. In that disclosure, I said I did not feel that it prevented me from being objective in my vote. And again, I have expressed in the past that I prefer to have a full-time interim counsel or full-time counsel in Town Hall. I think it better serves us than having a firm. That being said, in a transitional period with a new administration, and with Carolyn Murray acting as our liaison with KP Law, I feel very comfortable with this move. My question would be, or a point of clarification, the costs of many of the lawsuits and representation in many of the lawsuits that the town faces is borne by insurance counsel as well, and borne by the premium that we pay to those insurers as well. So in addition to this budget, there are costs that are related. If we're getting sued for a number of different reasons, slip and falls to civil rights violations, that's generally covered by our insurance and our premium. And I think a more general discussion of insurance as well as this budget would be in order to explain all that.
Is there a way to link those?
Oh, you could get I think that pursuant to your request, what you should get is a list of cases and status of each case from the legal department and from the insurers.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have no questions about this budget. I see that we don't have any support staff for, in the past we had a paralegal. We no longer have a paralegal. So is that function being taken, particularly for the licensing part, is that being done through the clerk's office?
I guess I probably would say it's probably, I think right now absorbed by a few functions. It's, I think that we haven't fully contemplated the long-term need of, what outside counsel will need to, staff internally and where those fall. So I think some of those burdens are kind of falling onto different folks across different departments.
Okay. I just, I'd like to have more clarity, if I could, about who's performing the support staff function for the licensing board. If you could get that to me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Moran. All right, I think that's a wrap for the legal department, but you're still on, Director Usmond, as we move to finance programs. And if you want to lead us off, that would be just fine. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm not sure I can top goats. I won't try. But I just wanted to work through the deck quickly as a way to summarize the major fiscal 25 items, and then please, I'll open up for questions. But the finance department really is made up of a number of functions, 16 staff in total, including myself. I'm joined here in the room by Paul Sullivan, who leads our assessing office, as well as Christina O'Connell. And we also have our town accountant, Mark Lynn, and Lorraine C., who oversees purchasing and procurement. So we really have a wide range of responsibilities that encompass really kind of all the critical financial accounting, financial reporting, audit, et cetera, in addition to treasurer, collector, and assessing. Looking at the budget at a glance, I won't walk through the minutia. I'm sure we'll talk through some of the questions, but You can see overall, the finance programs in total grow by 1.2%. Forecasted, the debt component of that makes up the biggest pieces. There are a few other highlights I do want to note, specifically in the assessing division, the evaluation services. When you review the line items, you'll see there's a notable increase. This is something I touched on very quickly last week during the revenue forecast. We went out and procured new valuation services and broke the valuation service contract into essentially two different components, real property and personal property, with the hope that we would get a better articulation of each of those outcomes as far as what those valuations are with two different efforts. The costs were likely, because this was a 3-year contract that was essentially being renewed, they were going to increase if we had just steady stated the existing scope of the existing contract. By breaking into two, though, however, we do have an increase of going from 93,000 to 171,000. It's our expectation that this will pay off with better data, better assessments, and more articulated, again, scope and firepower at those specific valuation requirements. Real property is it's a very differentiated from personal property when we're talking about things like in the personal property component, computers, network equipment, and the methodology and the time can be different. So we're expecting that we'll hopefully be able to report back on that later this year as a result of the first year of these engagements. And I think, Paul, they're both under contract now. So these are going to be moving forward. On the IT side, we didn't have any major new investments, but it's important to note the IT program in the finance grouping is really where the vast bulk of the town's IT spending is, at least on the town side. So this funds our enterprise software licenses through Munis, as well as the Microsoft 365 agreement, and then our MOA for support from BELD. Which is a critical part of our operations. The town, something I learned, we really have zero IT staff. Coming from a place where we had an IT department of, I don't know, probably between 20 and 30 people, many of them network, soft system administrators, et cetera. It's a different model. After a couple months, what I've observed is that it works, and we are well supported, but it's definitely different. And one that I think, what my observation would be is that you have to still keep software and technology as a solution on the front burner. And the budget process sometimes can be helpful to make sure that you are using that, you are looking at that annually as a solution. So there's, I think, a longer-term goal. We talked a little bit about innovation in some previous meetings to make sure that we can continue to find ways to fund, how we do business in the town as effectively as possible. So that is, I think, an important thing for folks to know that, it's not a big change year over year in the budget, but it's an important part of what we do, and it's something that we need to make sure that we're continuing to focus on. Insurance is another item, just briefly summarizing it, that we're seeing in continued pressure on our premiums. We've been asked to budget 9.5% of year over year by Maya. I think we've come out of the hardest part of the market, but it's still the case that property and casualty premium in the underwriting process is challenged for really for anybody, private or public. So we've been quoted at a range in the 9.5% increase, which is a big increase year over year, particularly because the town does have so much property and so much assets that it needs to insure. So you see that reflected in the estimate for fiscal '25, that increase. And those numbers are still going to need to be completed. The underwriting process continues. as well as the finalization of what the premium will be and how it's allocated across the town, school, and enterprise funds. So we make an approximation here of where those will land, and then typically will be invoiced at the end of the fiscal year to renew the policies at the beginning in July. And we are offered through Maya a number of programs. There's a prompt payment discount of 2.5%. We get credits for our town staff's participation in various programs around risk and risk avoidance, compliance, et cetera, as well as participation credits that we get for being a long-term Maya customer. So the relationship, I think, is good. Going through Maya, but it is a reality too that we do have to continue to, account for these costs of the town to do business and remain insured. We haven't really asked to make any major changes in the program. We are working with them. We had a couple good meetings to talk through some of the services they're offering, and I think that's probably the best way for us to continue is to engage with them and ensure that they remain a resource for us throughout the year to review our properties, how we manage them, if there's risks or ways to avoid, to limit our risk profile, I should say, through safety measures and other investments we can make. They've committed to be on site, to work with our facilities team, to work with our law enforcement, with our fire teams, to work with us to really across all our programs and departments to try to as best we can to reduce our risk and to continue to if we can't bring premium down, at least be able to use some of that experience in those trainings to get credit against it annually. Sorry. Just one more highlight and a notable one on the debt service, since this is the biggest part of the finance department expenses annually. Right now, for fiscal '25, you'll see that we are projecting approximately a $270,000 year-over-year change increase, bringing total general fund debt service to $10.5 million, which is about 6.5% of our annual operating revenues. And that's before, that's the existing revenue, not counting for any funds that would be available through an override. The chart that I provided on page 5 is just a 10-year look. The actual debt service schedule goes out past 2040. But just to give the members of Ways and Means a sense of the major components of our debt service profile, the bottom 3 tranches are essentially what make up the component of the $10.5 million for fiscal '25 and the out years. So you can see really where debt service is forecast to go for existing debt owed today, as of today. The big, essentially what the general fund burden will be is really, again, those 3 bottom tiers. The table on the last page essentially just shows those numbers that were visualized. The total debt service for fiscal '25 is the $22.3 million. General fund only for the existing debt service is just over 10. Our budget assumes an additional $534,000, and as I noted, that's about a $270,000 increase. Right now, we are projecting that that $534 would be incurred as interest through short-term borrowing. So essentially, we would be issuing notes for some time into fiscal '25. There's a couple things to note with respect to this approach. We are working very closely with Hilltop, who is our long-term financial advisor on this approach. One of the challenges we've had the last few years, and it's with the, and I think folks on Ways and Means know, every year we do some short-term borrowing with respect to financing the outstanding grant payable amounts or grants receivable amounts from the MSBA. So we are closing essentially 3 projects now, 3 essentially authorized projects with the New South Middle School and the roof projects at the schools. So we are anticipating we will need to issue some short-term borrowing just associated with making sure that we can finance the outstanding receivables associated with the final project closeout with the MSBA. Furthermore, we're also similarly looking at a similar forecast for cash flow financing for the Tri-Town project as well. And again, those are just timing, but we know there is some level of uncertainty that we have with respect to when those payments will be received by the town, just as a matter of their project closeout process. Additionally, we have about $4.8 million in capital expenditures this year that we need to finance. So what this right now forecasts is that we would potentially issue short-term notes less than a year in duration, incur the interest costs of those borrowing, and then after we close out the where we are with those grants, have essentially a refund those short-term borrowings associated with our bond programs, our bond authorizations, with a full bond program later next year. That would allow us to get some savings on our debt service side for fiscal '25, and also account for some uncertainty about when we will get the when we will get the final payments and bring those what town share we'd have for those associated programs on the school side. So we're working again closely with Hilltop to calculate what those will be for the close of this year, and then bring that to bring that to final execution sometime in mid to late June, for us to issue those notes, and then be in good shape to close out the fiscal '24 for those capital projects that have balances that need to be funded. And I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Director Esmond, and very much appreciate your organized presentation and thoroughness on this this evening. So thank you so much. Are there questions from the counselors? Councilor Moran?
Thank you. Mike, I'd like to first of all say that I'm very impressed with your work thus far. Again, the budget materials are very voluminous, and they provide us with a lot of information, and I appreciate your willingness to be so transparent and forthcoming with it. There's a couple of areas that I want to ask about. I want to go back to the reval issue. What do you feel we've been missing in our evaluation process that drove you to put this significant increase into our evaluation or reval budget?
Sure. And Paul, I don't know if I can ask if you could join me. Maybe I could just quickly answer that, but I certainly would welcome any feedback from Paul. But I think the big part is in this, a lot of this was informed before I was here, but Ed and I had, he was very gracious about meeting with me and talking to me about it. So I think the big piece, Counselor, is that on the personal property side, we felt that this was an area that we needed to, really kind of make sure that we were getting some better data and better valuations calculations for that. If we had two separate procurements, we would potentially get we'd be able to select a firm based on, in that area, on their expertise, not just one that we're trying to say is essentially the best fit for that. But I don't know, Paul, if there's anything you want to add.
Good evening, councilors. Basically, I think with the personal property, you have a company now that does that all the time. Prior, you had a company that was doing the real and the personal property, not experts. So I think by separating it, the vendor can do the real estate, and then you have professionals doing the personal property, the business personal property. And they're going to be doing a complete relisting of all the parcels in the town, approximately 1,200. So we're going to get a baseline and then go from there. And each year, they will subsequently do new, in a sense, remeasure relisting of the business personal property in the community. So I think that's going to help out to
Okay,
increase.
I appreciate that, but isn't it statutory that companies have to self-report personal property?
They do. However, some of the businesses aren't aware of it. So we're out there going through the property, the businesses, and identifying the items. that
So
are-
with this vendor, you'll be doing a lot more on-site visitations, and
Yeah.
you'll be asking for access to property as well. Isn't a lot of our personal property now telecommunications and things that are pretty self-evident?
Some of it has been, however, there's been a reduction, for example, in Verizon because of the new systems that they're using and bringing forth. So that has reduced a little bit.
Okay, is this a 3-year contract?
Yes.
If it's not working after 1 year, you've doubled your costs, and if you see it, is there a cancellation penalty?
That I'd have to look in the contract, Counselor.
Okay.
They've been doing it for many years.
What other towns are doing 2 vendors on this?
Quite a few, that's why. Personally, in my 22 years as an assessor, the vendor has been in many communities in Massachusetts.
But 2 vendors is unusual in my experience, in 12 years as an assessor and as a town administrator. I've never seen 2 separate vendors doing revale work.
The prior vendor was doing both, and it was not working efficiently, it seemed.
So are we transitioning away from the prior vendor?
The prior vendor is going to be doing the real estate. That's what they are well known for. The business personal property is going to be the new vendor, and they've been around many years.
Who's the new vendor?
Real estate research consultants, known as RRC,
Okay,
and they've been doing it for many years.
okay.
Councilor Warren, do you mind if I just get a point of clarification?
Yeah, sure.
So just again, thank you, Assessor Sullivan, for being with us tonight. Can you just quickly explain, so real estate is what I pay for my property taxes, and personal property is what?
Personal property is basically business personal property for all the commercial and industrial properties in the community, and that is the items that are used in the business. For example, you have a restaurant or convenience store, it would be cash registers.
It's like the big capital and stuff
any
that
item.
companies need to function, so
Yeah,
giant
any-
ovens or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you for that, just for myself and anybody at home who might be watching. I know people are tuned in to their own taxes, so thank you. Carry on, Counselor, thank you for that.
Thank you. But Form ABCs are supposed to include this, that every business in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is supposed to file.
They're supposed to file,
Okay,
Counselor.
and there is a penalty if they do not.
Some communities can charge a fine, in a sense, for failure to provide the information.
Okay. Thank you for your clarification on this. I appreciate it. I would like to turn to another area now. I noticed in your budget, the line for OPEB is 0.
That's correct, Counselor.
Why is that?
Frankly, just affordability or lack of affordability.
All right.
It was something we have, we I didn't highlight it. I should have probably, because it is something that is it's an important liability to address for cities and towns.
All right, just so I'm, for the people that don't know at home, OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. They're basically the insurance coverage of retirees. It's one of the two large buckets or things that municipalities have to address, one being the pension cost and one being, and that's to fund the retirement system, and the second being post-employment benefits to go along with that. And the town recognized this when it was adopted as a general accounting principle, that the responsibility to finance this, and had a aggressive financing program over the years. I think it is equally important as not using one-time sources of funds. It is equally important to fund this line item. Post-employment benefits cannot go unfunded, and we need to address that. And so one of the areas that I would like to explore, I know that there have been premium holidays given for health insurance because of surpluses that have been realized in that, because utilization has been lower than anticipated. Well, everybody likes to get a break on their insurance premium. Would it be possible to use that surplus to fund OPEB? You're funding retirement health insurance, which admittedly it isn't out of the premium cost, but it goes to the same employees just at a later time. I think that's worthy of exploration rather than granting holidays. Right. I think the amount of progress that we're making in this budget to show that we're turning around and doing the right thing, this is going to stick out like a sore thumb when we go to borrow, that we're not addressing this facet of our budget. And we're going to answer questions about it, and to get away from a negative outlook when we're not funding OPEB is going to be tricky. I am concerned that isn't funded.
Thanks, Counselor. I understand your point very clearly. When we talked about the development of the forecast of the gap and $18 million, these are the types of things that are included in that, and because of I think also last week it came up as well, the long-term solution of when the pension liability is finally resolved, essentially moving those big contributions to OPEB would be
everybody's plan is the pour over. Everybody's plan. It's the only way you can do it. I understand that. I get it. The two things that we have to concern ourselves with, though, is can we afford the schedule that we're on to fund our pension, which I don't believe we can, which is evidenced by the fact that we've had to ask for relief this year, and I think we're going to have to go and ask to lengthen that price. So the pour over that we're going to get from fully funding our pension into OPEB is going to be postponed. So we are going to have to address it more readily or more appropriately through our operational budgets. Other communities dedicate a portion or their entire meals tax revenue towards this, okay? We're not in a position clearly to do that. But if we get some of these local options that the governor introduced, we may want to consider using that as an OPEB financing tool. I'm going to keep a close eye on this effort on revaluation to see if it yields what we hope that it does. And I hope that it does, because that could help alleviate our OPEB problem. But if it doesn't, I would rather see that money put into the OPEB fund, even if it's a pittance. It's at least addressing it, and we're demonstrating to rating agencies when we're going to go out and borrow, that we're taking the problem on as best we can given our circumstances, and perhaps that would result in better principal and interest payments. So, I am very impressed with your work thus far. I think you've done an excellent job. You've exceeded reasonable expectations for someone coming in this climate with your learning curve, having not worked in municipalities before. You've done outstanding work. I know you'd like to fund this if you could. I'm going to be your ally in getting the zeros out of that column, but we have to do it. And if we have to be creative, we have to be creative, but we have to do it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Madam Chair.
Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor Moran. Counselor Maglito, do you have any questions? Okay, I have a few questions, and they're probably for you, Mr. Sullivan. So, blight and abatements on the assessments. When abatements are filed, I guess it's a two-part question. How long does that process take, and what is when do we find out if an abatement was granted? It has to go through court, is that correct? And then what happens in the meantime? Do they not pay their taxes if they filed for an abatement?
Counselor, each year, each fiscal year, when the actual tax bill is sent out, and that usually occurs at the end of December, so there's a time frame in order for the taxpayer to file. It usually runs from January 1st to February 1st. At that point, the assessors have 90 days to act on that, whether it's approved, denied, or some type of consideration. If the taxpayer disagrees with that decision, they have the right to file timely at the appellate tax board. At the appellate tax board, it may take time to be heard, and part of that has been due to COVID. There's been a backlog of cases. So it does take some time. If the taxpayer provides reasonable documentation, I go through the property, verify the information. If it needs to be corrected, the data is corrected, and abatement is warranted, and then the Board of Assessors will sign off on that and proceed to conclude that abatement. If it's not, it may take time. You may need to get an appraisal to value the property. The taxpayer oftentimes has an appraisal performed to back their thought, what they think the property is worth. So it can take some years.
And in the meantime, we're not collecting taxes on said property?
They are required to pay the tax each year, and there's a formula that they need to pay at least a minimum, but for the most part, they have to pay the tax each year. It's not as if just because they file, they are not required to pay a tax. They do have to pay the tax each year.
Okay. And do we have a list of commercial properties, industrial properties in town that is available, or does it need to go through a FOIA request of which properties have filed for abatements?
Through a FOIA request, we can
Okay.
provide the parcel ID, but as far as the application itself, that's confidential.
Okay. And then my next question, and thank you for that explanation. My next question, and I want to thank Councilor Moran, who had brought this up at an Ordinance and Rules Committee meeting. So for example, St. Thomas More property, which is no longer being used as a religious institution, what is the process for collecting taxes now on that property? And part B to that is, for example, like the St. Francis of Assisi property, the church is in use, but the school is not.
Correct.
Could you
The-
address those,
The
please?
St. Thomas More, Counselor, is going to be taxed this coming fiscal year, and the reason is they failed to provide the documentation to have them be recognized as being exempt, and they did not ask for a extension to file the documentation. So therefore, for fiscal year '25, FY '25, which starts July 1st, they'll be receiving a tax bill going forward until something else, if it develops and is sold, if the purchaser is exempt or taxable entity, then the taxes would be assessed accordingly. But for fiscal '25, it will be taxed.
And then what about like a split property, or is that the property considered all, because one of the buildings over at St. Francis was a school, it's now, as far as I know, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, is not being used for educational or religious purposes. But is that considered one parcel with the church on it?
There's 2 parcels there, and they've been exempt, and now they're going to be taxable because they're not being used for the benefit of being an exempt entity through the Archdiocese.
Okay, so we will be
Yeah.
collecting taxes on
Taxes.
what's not being used. Okay, thank
Correct.
you for clarifying that. And then Director Esmond, you had mentioned in your presentation the insurance premiums. And part of that is because we do have a lot of municipal buildings, some of which are not, or are either underutilized or vacant.
Correct.
So if we were to sell off those town buildings, in addition to getting the revenue from the sale, would our insurance premiums go down as well, or is it like on a per building basis?
Yeah, so typically you file a statement of values every year with the property, for the property underwriter, essentially, that is filed, and that's the basis ultimately of the valuation or of the premium they're going to quote. So it's, what I would say is I don't know that it's always exactly formulaic one for one, but absolutely, if we have a robust property portfolio management perspective where properties of a meaningful square footage and count were reduced, I think we should expect. I would have a hard time understanding why we wouldn't see a premium drop from that. It's just, like I said, it's hard to say exactly what it would be, but I mean, I think that would absolutely directionally be entirely accurate.
Okay, but I think the point, and thank you for that, like my point is, there's an ancillary benefit to, financially, to maybe be above and beyond just like a sales price and a
Yeah.
new source of tax revenue. We're also decreasing our insurance, which alleviates some of the burden we're putting on our taxpayers for like things that aren't as tangible.
Correct, yeah.
So thank you for that. The last thing, and I'm not sure what legal power we have on this, but the pilot negotiations, I think could we get an updated list of where our pilot payments are, please? And then,
The timeframes.
yes, thank you. I know we have Beld and a few others as well.
Yep.
Go ahead, Councilor Maglio.
And the payment in lieu of taxes, would that actually capture in-kind amounts, like Bell providing our IT?
No, that wouldn't account for that. That agreement really, there are 2 separate agreements that are sort
Okay.
of totally separate. But yeah, so it wouldn't be in
Okay.
there per se.
All right, anything else? Oh, Councilor Moran.
I wasn't going to bring this up, but since the chair asked, it is the law in the Commonwealth since 2011, and the Mother Cabrini Parish in Situate was closed, and the town of Situate issued a tax bill. Once the Archdiocese relegates a parish for profane use, it is immediately taxable. St. Thomas More was relegated in December of 2022. A bill should be issued for this current fiscal year as well. We're behind on this if we're not getting the tax revenue that we're owed if we do not tax them for this fiscal year as well. It is well settled that and the guidance from both the Appellate Tax Board, the Department of Revenue, and even the guidance that religious organizations send to their own entities, that once you close, you're taxable. It's well settled. The Archdiocese didn't even challenge that in the SJC. They backed off and dismissed their case. So we should be taxing them for this year as well.
So
Thank
can
you.
we get a follow-up on that, or what the position is of the mayor's office on that, please? Thank you. Thank you, Counselor Moran. All right, anything else on finance? Okay, and again, thank you, Director Esmond. I want to acknowledge that your department was on tonight, but you've been with us every night, and I know you'll be back next week, and we're really grateful for your time and expertise in this field, so thank you. And thank you to, I think we see, do I see Christina? Thank you for being here, and Chief of Staff, Kara Nyman and Paul Sullivan. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And of course, our own town auditor, Sean McGoldrick, who I know had a long commute, so we really appreciate you being here, Sean. All right, with that, I believe we need a motion to table 24020. Is there a motion to table?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous. Is that all we need to table, Sue?
Now you can adjourn.
Okay. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you so much, and thank you, BCAM.